Welcome to IP Goes Pop, your source for exploring the interface between intellectual property and pop culture. The IP Goes Pop podcast series is created and produced by Volpe Koenig, an intellectual property law firm based in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Visit us at vklaw.com. This program should not be considered legal advice. Please consult an attorney for your specific situation. And now your hosts, intellectual property attorneys, Michael Snyder and Joseph Gushue.
Greetings and cheers, listeners, and welcome back to another fun-filled and exciting episode of IP Goes Pop. This is Michael Snyder of Volpe Koenig. I'm here, as always, with co-host Joe Gushue. Joe, hello and welcome.
Hi, Mike. Very happy to get into another pop culture-rich episode with you today.
Well, we're going to have some fun. We are in the world of sports and branding and some really interesting sports-related technology. Today, our topic is IP Goes Pop carries a torch for the Olympic Games. So we'll have a lot to talk about here. Of course, first, some disclaimer. We are not providing legal advice. If you need legal advice, please seek out an attorney. This is for entertainment and interest purposes. And with that, away we go. So we're talking about the Olympic Games. They're coming up. They are in Tokyo. Is that correct? I lose track sometimes. They never really mention it.
Currently, yes, the games will be there. The fans will not.
So we are going to be releasing right around the Olympic Games and all the initial pomp and circumstance that surrounds it. It's always a spectacle. But from the IP Goes Pop world, so the interplay of the Olympics and popular culture and intellectual property, there's actually a lot of intellectual property that surrounds the Olympic Games. But before we get there, some of the IP has to do with images or some of the athletes that become famous just through the games. And well, let's talk about some of them. So what athletes, Joe, have become household names in no order of appearance and no particular era? Who do we think of when we think of the Olympic Games and people who really became celebrities and maybe even current sports celebrities from the Olympic Games?
Well, the Olympics are just such a big launching pad for a lot of different careers of people that are just part of culture now. And this Olympics is different than ones in the past because it's been delayed a year. It's even still being called the 2020 Olympics, even though we all did lose a year last year. This is 2021. They'll be holding it. No fans, but that won't impact the fame that some people wind up leaving the Olympics with. Because in the run-up, I guess we've almost had a year and a half of commercials featuring a lot of these Olympic stars where we usually regularly only see them a couple months every 4 years, depending obviously on the type of sport that the athlete's playing. But you can really go back a long ways to see some famous people that got their start in the Olympics. But I'll just go back to, somewhat dating myself. But I think one of the biggest stars that I've heard always coming from the Olympics is in recent times would be Caitlyn Jenner getting her start winning gold medal in the decathlon.
Right. Just a brutal, challenging, set of events where you have to be somewhat good at everything. So it was, I remember watching with my family and just being on the edge of our seat at every single event. Just like everyone else, I think when the Olympics come around, and I think this is true for both summer and Winter Olympics, but people tend to become experts in all the sports and know all the terminology.
Oh, yeah. And they sell so much of the human interest story with things. I think the NBC obviously carrying the coverage now. There's so much time devoted into telling you about the athlete, all the training that went into it, their family. They're always showing you family in the stands, which will definitely be different this year. But they try to really package the athletes together, let you know all about them. Like, for instance, McKayla Maroney, who was in a lot of, she's in commercials now, but she was very famous from her stint in the Olympics for the gymnasts and making her smirk when she got her silver medal. And now that smirk has been leveraged into a different advertising campaigns that she's a part of. And, she's, many years removed from competing in the Olympics now, but she's still quite famous. And, the gymnasts have obviously really been quite famous in the Olympics, but that's something that only comes around every 4 years. Usually go sometime and forget about them.
In another year, I remember Mary Lou Retton. She became a celebrity for her gold medal, another gymnast. And I guess all across all the different sports, I mean, there's Simone Biles is actively now just a huge, social media celebrity. And you see clips of all her trials and competitions, and kind of, she's almost a superhero. The way people view what she could do things normal people can't do. So maybe she is a superhero.
Oh yeah. Yeah. She's the best gymnast ever, and just continuing to push the boundaries of what people think are possible in her sport.
Now, off the IP Goes Pop ticker, in the notes, Joe, that you provided, there was the infamous or famous Dan versus Dave Reebok challenge. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I remember this 1992 Olympics, and it started in the Super Bowl. So I was saying, before the Olympics start, a lot of these ad campaigns, and as we'll get into this show, the actual Olympics themselves, they're planned 10 years or so in advance about how they're going to package these things up. But Dan and Dave were two athletes competing in the decathlon, and Reebok, obviously a big player in athletics at the time, had this big Dan versus Dave campaign that they were going to compete against one another in the 92 Olympics. And then Dan went and did not qualify for the Olympics.
Which really made the competition a lot less exciting when you only had one of them. But I do remember that I believe there's a 30 for 30 on this, the ESPN 30 for 30 sports show. And I do remember he went and cheered for Dave, who did make it, but I know it didn't turn out to be everything they want. And in fact, I know Reebok paid a fortune for sponsorship that year.
So much so, yeah. And also Dan did wind up winning the gold medal in the 96 Olympics. So it just took him another 4 years with it. But yeah, Reebok ran into that issue. And then the same issue Reebok ran into as being the sponsor of the Olympics, which we'll get into a bit, all that comes along with that, all the money, and then all the expectations of what you're able to do. They sponsored the Dream Team also that year. And that was the first time that the first time the NBA stars competed in the Olympics. And there's a very famous image of Michael Jordan draped in the American flag, receiving
very, very patriotic,
as well as covering up the Reebok logo of the warm-up that he was wearing. Michael Jordan being a brand ambassador of Nike, he did not want anyone that image captured. So there's a urban myth.
Joe, that's really interesting, because as the athletes get more savvy or more, IP savvy, that's something you might have never heard of 10 years before that. Michael Jordan's so ingrained with a particular brand that it became an issue for him to wear the sponsored Reebok gear. So, we could go through a number of people. I mean, there was, from the Winter Olympics, there's Apollo Ono, who became, a celebrity. I think he went on to do a few interesting things as well. He was a speed skater, correct?
Speed skater. Love it. Yes. Speed skating. That's always, it was always on like 11 o'clock at night too, for some reason. So it was always late night speed skating. And then also in the same Winter Olympic vein, we've had Tyra Lipinski and Johnny Weir have careers after their figure skating careers ended, doing red carpet work for NBC, covering the Oscars and then Kentucky Derby. They have a good rapport with one another, but those are Olympic stars that are now around post-Olympics. So,
of course, it's almost impossible from a branding standpoint to think of the Olympics and not think of the Wheaties cereal box. I remember walls of, images of Caitlyn Jenner and Mary Lou Retton. They become part of history. They become iconic parts of pop culture. Joe, are there any particular Wheaties related Olympic boxes for you?
I looked at this. Getting on the Wheaties box at the Olympics is almost the equivalent of winning the Super Bowl and going to Disney World or Disneyland. It was always just hand in hand with one another. That being said, I do not know how many boxes of Wheaties are sold anymore, but they are still putting these athletes on boxes. And I was doing a little research, and Michael Jordan has actually been featured on the Wheaties box the most. He has the most covers of Wheaties boxes. But, in recent time, Michael Phelps, obviously on the Wheaties box, both before and after some of the out of the pool controversies he's been through.
Oh, that's right. That's right. He's quite a character.
Yeah, he's on the boxes. Then all the advertisers leave him, and then America loves the redemption story. And then, like you had said, we have a number of the female gymnasts that have been so successful over the decades, appearing on the Wheaties boxes, and it actually goes all the way back to almost the beginning of the modern Olympics, where Wheaties has been putting athletes on its boxes and in an attempt of selling their cereal to young children, and with the theme of eat the Wheaties, and hopefully you'll be able to compete as well as all of our proud U.S. Olympians.
So transitioning into movies a bit here. Now, it's kind of funny. When I started to do some of the research myself for this episode, I actually thought there were more movies about the Olympics because there is so much drama. But let's talk about some of the Olympic movies.
No, but you're right, Mike. Yeah, when we did look at the list, it was not as big as we would think. And oddly, there's nothing really in the middle. There's like just sort of goofy Olympic movies.
Right.
And then there's extremely serious Olympic movies.
Well, let's start with incredibly inspiring. So the movie is Miracle from 2004. Joe, what does that focus on? And, this is obviously, now I'm going to say I did not see this movie, but I have practically memorized the real world events that the movie's based on.
Oh, sure. Yeah. The 1980 men's hockey team winning the gold medal of the 1980 Olympics. Very big underdog, defeating the Soviet team on the way to capturing the gold medal. The movie with Kurt Russell's excellent, but like you said, Mike, this story's been, it's hard to find anyone unaware of this, and ESPN's also featured it in it's their 30 for 30 documentary series. But just a very feel good bunch of college kids winding up winning the gold medal in something that they weren't expected to do that in.
I just wonder even if a movie could capture the real life drama of that particular team and all of the imagery. If you recall, there was the goalie looking for his father, when they won the gold medal game. There was the captain of the team calling everyone up on the podium when they got their medals. It's things that you'll just never forget, which is, I know that's what the sponsors are banking on for every single Olympics, for that moment where they are forever ingrained in the hearts and minds and popular culture. But let's go to the other end of the spectrum as far as what is not a particularly feel-good story. The movie is I, Tonya, 2017's movie. What do we have here, Joe? It's a lot different than the Miracle on Ice.
Yeah, pretty dark. The Tonya Harding story, where Nancy Kerrigan was attacked in the lead up to their Winter Olympics in figure skating, and that just sort of followed Tonya Harding's life and sort of dramatized that, showed some of the struggles that she went through and put her in that position. But again, a story that people were very well aware of in advance. But like Miracle and the 1980 hockey team, it's something, if you were to write this story, absent any fact, you'd be like, that's crazy. You have to go back to write me something that people would believe. Like, these are almost just completely out there things where truth actually is stranger than fiction. But the Winter Olympics, definitely from our research, it seems to be slanted in that material, having more movies based on the Winter Games than the Summer Games, but definitely covering all sides of serious to not serious. And when you go back to the Olympics, it's almost like, Mike, you had mentioned with Miracle and the hockey team and people wanting to capture these moments of almost like Americana. That was almost like a simpler time in the 80s, because I think the marketing and the money and the coverage of the Olympics, which before was maybe on tape delay, you would sit down with your family, everyone would be watching things unfold at that particular time. Now there's so much money that goes in the Olympics. There's so many hours of coverage. It's on streaming. It's on 5, 6 different cable networks, and there's instant results. Yet still, they will only show the different, the high profile items in prime time. So we have to deal with the tape delay. But it's interesting to see how things have evolved so much in, I guess, 40 years or so, with how the Olympics are packaged and presented to everyone.
There's an absolute fan favorite movie, Cool Runnings, which was about the Jamaican bobsled team. I know that the movie itself departed from the true story a lot, but it introduced people to this kind of incredible feel-good story, which was also a pretty well done movie. There is The Cutting Edge, which for some reason, I know many people who saw this movie. It was the 1992 movie about the hockey player who gets injured and can no longer play hockey, but he can perform in mixed pairs skating, I guess, or ice dancing.
I think it was on TNT or TBS, maybe like every week for a while. I think that's how a lot of people have seen it.
It tells the story of the blue collar hockey player and the spoiled figure skater. It's just one of those cable movies where it's on in the background. I think people just kind of leave it on
all the time. It's a tale as old as time too, Mike. Everyone knows The Cutting Edge.
Star-crossed, right? And eventually, no spoilers, but you could guess whether they make the Olympic team or not.
I think I've seen the movie, beginning to end once, but parts of it at least like 30 times. So it's like one of those things you just walk past and the TV's on, you'll watch a couple.
And just to wrap up the movie section, the Olympic movie section, we have the instant classic, or is it? I don't know. Blades of Glory. It's a Will Ferrell movie, also starring John Heder of Napoleon Dynamite fame. In the world of, I guess, pairs and mixed pairs, ice skating or ice dancing. I'm not sure which one it is.
Well, this will be a good segue into the next topic we want to go to, Mike. That movie, they couldn't secure the rights to using the name the Olympics that they were competing in. So they were competing in the World Winter Sport Games.
There you go. So, Joe, that was a masterful segue into the world of branding within the world of the Olympics. So the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee, as well as the International Olympic Committee, so the IOC and the USPOC. And by the way, once you get into Olympics, a lot of acronyms. That's what I learned getting ready for this episode. But there are many rules, including actual legal statutes that control how people use the branding for the Olympics. So you need permission. You cannot just use the word Olympics in a commercial use to advertise. Basically, you have to have permission. It has to be under agreements. If you're going to use the U.S. Olympics, you have to have it with the U.S. OPC. If you're going to use it internationally or just use an Olympics, you have to do it with the IOC. And on the teamusa.org website are there what we would call their brand usage guidelines. And I just wanted to talk about for a minute, when you have a lot of trademarks or logos, and you want to control very specifically how people use them. And this is true of many brands have these, and you could just do a Google search of brand usage guidelines. So if you go to the teamusa.org website under brand usage guidelines, you will see all of the trademarks that they administer, including Olympics, Olympiad, Olympian, Go for the Gold, Let the Games Begin, Tokyo 2020. Joe, as you said, they registered it originally as 2020, and they're keeping the 2020. We'll talk about the rings a little bit more, but they also have all the logos you're allowed to use, and they're very strict and very particular as to how you use them. They are backed by rules and international laws that help protect the branding. So you can't just start selling USA Olympic, T-shirts. Even if you're an athlete, there is a special rule, IOC Rule 40, which for sponsorships of athletes, it actually has a blackout period. So while you're competing and for some time after, even if you're sponsored by a company, if that sponsor is not also an official Olympic sponsor, then you are not permitted to do any commercial advertising with that. I don't know, Joe, if you got to look at the Rule 40 and how it impacts the athletes?
No, just a little bit of it, Mike, but it like sort of just goes back to the whole point. The Olympics was always about amateurs when it first started. And you can see how over the 100+ years that we've been having the modern games, how much money has become involved in it, where people were losing medals for accepting a little bit of money and losing their amateur status. Now we actually have professionals doing it. And the expectation is that these professionals are doing advertising for the different sponsors of the Olympics, these companies that have contributed, some cases, hundreds of millions of dollars to the Olympic Committee in order to become a sponsor of a particular part of the Olympics with things.
That's probably fair. If you're paying hundreds of millions, quite literally hundreds of millions to be an official sponsor, you certainly don't want third parties to be able to have the same benefits that you do without also paying and becoming official. That there is a fairness balance here for making sure to protect the actual sponsors.
Yeah, and as you have said with some of the different content we've put out in relation to the Olympics, there is some confusion of being able to show support. Like you want to have this balance of letting people support the Olympic athletes and perhaps have some messaging out there saying, do well in the Olympics. But then at the same time, you need to make sure that your exclusive sponsors are able to use the term Olympic in their different marketing material that they do put out there with different things.
And Joe, you raise a good point. I do want to point out that it really prohibits the use of some of these marks in the commercial context. So in a non-commercial, or we would think, as we talked about on IP Goes Pop, the fair use type of context, I don't think if someone's family were in the stands and made a bunch of homemade banners, I don't see the IOC running into the stands and kind of yanking them away. And, I certainly wouldn't see it on camera, but I don't think that would happen. But I do think that they will protect it, from someone selling in the parking lot or the stadium, their own homemade types of shirts and things. Oh, and by the way, we have on the vklaw.com website, we do have an article about some of the trademark battles, if you will, or some of the trademark enforcement. And one close to home, which was in Philadelphia, home of our firm, there was a gyro shop. I don't know if people say gyro or gyro. I'm going to go with gyro. I feel like I've been corrected on this. But in 2012, there was a gyro vendor in Philly who was Olympic Gyro, and they had been in business for almost 30 years. Somehow they got on the radar of the IOC, and there was a lawsuit, and they eventually had to change their name. By the way, they are still in business. I believe it says Olympiad. I mean, basically, their argument was the Olympics originated in Greece. We are a Greek family selling, a historically Greek food, and our imagery is kind of just as valid. But that does go to show you that they will try to enforce, or they will enforce those rights that they have spent a lot of time and effort protecting.
That's why you can't really call anything reading Olympics or, math Olympics. That's sort of why people are mathletes, or they're doing something else, because anything with picks at the end of it is going to potentially be problematic and get on the radar. And then once you're on the radar, you're obviously going to incur some legal fees and try to defend whatever brand you were using, or the more cost-effective route may be to just potentially change your brand and then hopefully bring it to a close there with things. But in that same article, Mike, you did see that it's written there was another community of a knitting community wanting to host something called the Rave Olympics, and IOC sent a letter to them, and due to some sort of public backlash, the IOC did wind up dropping that particular suit against them.
You do not want to go up against an army with crochet needles. You just don't. So I could see why they backed down. But just speaking specifically about the famous Olympic symbol of the 5 rings, that is actually protected by an international treaty. It's called the Nairobi Treaty on the Protection of the Olympic Symbol. All the countries who would like to be a host country or were a host country must sign on to this treaty on the protection of the Olympic symbol. And by signing on, you say that you will not only use the symbol properly and according to the guidelines, but you are kind of deputized to help enforce the protection of the Olympic symbol. So you will not see the Olympic symbol just show up on T-shirts and coffee mugs without a lot of permissions and sponsorships and, jumping through a lot of hoops to get that permission.
It's a wild name, Mike. I wouldn't believe it if I wasn't reading it. The Nairobi Treaty on the Protection of the Olympic Symbol.
It actually sounds like something that was made up for the movie Blades of Glory. I would believe that first.
Yeah. Or it's like in a superhero movie.
And, this isn't the last time, obviously, on IP Goes Pop, we're going to talk about sports, because sports often produce a lot of technology, and the Olympics are no exception. The Olympics have actually, or filming and broadcasting the Olympics has resulted in some really interesting innovations and technologies, and of course, some patents and patent protections based on making sure that, or having a broadcast that people could engage in, and also just to protect, certain technologies for outside of the Olympics. But Joe, let's run down some of the interesting technology that we found in support of this episode that are really direct Olympic tie-ins.
Yeah, sure. So I'll, like what you were saying, there's so much broadcasting, a lot of eyeballs on the Olympics. Companies are paying huge amounts of money for the exclusive broadcast rights. To do so, you want to make sure your audience is getting a very great experience. And there's a lot of innovation that is first rolled out at the Olympics and has since people will see in other sports as they're watching it. But one of the ones I wanted to mention first is the Hawkeye ball tracking system. It was filed in the UK. Now you'll see it more frequently while watching tennis. Used to be you'd have a player argue at the umpire and yell at them whether the ball was in or out. John McEnroe basically made a post-playing career out of this.
Right.
Are you serious? He's just yelling that all the time at someone. But now people just say, I want a replay. Everyone starts clapping real slowly, and then they show you the replay screen. That's this Hawkeye ball tracking technology, there's a patent on it. There's a number of different cameras set up in different areas of the stadium or whatever court they're going to be deploying the system on. And what it does is it tracks the ball as well as stitching together each of these cameras, and it's able to triangulate the ball's movement and then create a three-dimensional representation of that. So you're able to see in tennis whether the ball was in or out.
And by the way, Joe, as you know, I am a huge tennis fan. And when this technology started, anytime in sports they take out the human element, there's always a certain group of fans that doesn't like it. But I'll tell you, it's pretty exciting when people challenge the call and then they do that zoom in and the ball could be out or in by, millimeters, and the crowd go, they ooh and ah, and they go crazy. So not only is this technology, accurate and actually performing its job of calling things in or out, but it makes it more exciting. So this is how technology adds.
And I think of all the sports, huge sports fan here, but like tennis does a great job with the replay because it doesn't take away so much from the game. Whereas a lot of other sports, they're doing replay, but it'll take a long time to wrap it up. And it's not really, I don't know how much you're getting for it.
And I think tennis with the Hawkeye was the sport to really integrate it and make it part of the game. Plus, it doesn't take that long. Whereas basketball comes to a screeching halt.
Oh, it's brutal. I wish they just had a replay official that would just make the call quicker and we could just get on with things, because it does detract from the experience with it. Another bit of technology at the Olympics, which was fun to research, is this twin scam water synthesis camera, which is, I watch a fair amount of diving during the Olympics too. Something much like speed skating. I'll watch every 4 years, become an expert for a month or two. And then I just sort of hang it up for 4 years. But anyway, this is the bit of technology that will stitch together two different cameras so that you're able to see in the air someone diving in from the pool. It'll track them down. I think people have seen this, track them down as they're diving and then follow them into the water. And you'll see the person then complete their dive in the water, swim up to the surface. To the viewer, it looks a very seamless experience where it appears as if one camera is able to capture the person diving the whole way down through their impact in water to the bottom of the pool. But what it actually is a very clever way of combining the video from two different cameras, one above the water, one under the water in real time. And it creates this illusion that it's one single camera being able to capture that.
And I do want to do one tie-in on actually one of our firm clients, Joe, whose work you work on as well, which are Axis cameras from Sweden. They're in the world of security cameras, but in the world of security cameras, stitching together multiple images is a huge part of the technology, of the modern technology. And I feel like this particular type of technology falls into that world of, you have 10 cameras pointed in somewhat different directions, but to the viewer, you're putting it all together, and it takes a lot of technology on the back end to put that final image together for you.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And especially now with people wanting to, broadcast this out, capture and broadcast in almost real time, which how a lot of the Olympics are being covered. Like there's just a lot of computing power, a lot of different advancements need to be made in order to bring this stuff, which you would only think would be able to be done offline, being able to do that in almost real time and deliver it to everyone to watch. And then I think one of the other things we wanted to cover is Olympics and patents is that the Olympic torch actually also has a patent on it. And the Olympic torch flame and the way that the flame is lit, the Coleman company actually has a patent on that. And it covers the different material and the way in which fuel is exposed to the flame and then making the actual torch light a certain way. Even that part of the Olympics, because it's quite important for the Olympic torch as it makes its way from Athens to the host city by land, water, and everything else it needs to encounter on the way. It can't go out.
Can you imagine the with the pomp and circumstance as someone is approaching the final lighting of the torch as they pass? It comes all the way from Athens, Greece, and as they're approaching, it goes out. You don't want to be the company in charge of that technology if it doesn't work.
No, you don't want your name on that. That's for sure.
I mean, I'm sure that there are going to be amazing moments from the athletes that, well, first of all, track and field, it seems like the records are just mind-bending when you see how fast a human being can travel, in a straight or curved line. It's pretty amazing. And I really look forward every 4 years to one of these stories that emerges, and it could be in a sport that people don't pay a lot of attention to, but all of a sudden we all get pulled into it and wrapped into, and that is the magic, of the Olympics. And it's why they protect the brand, as strongly as they do. And rightly so, because you do not want to kind of diminish that, and holding, amateur athletes to a really high standard, and then making sure that the people who are sponsors of it are also held, to very strict regulations. It makes sense, because if you're going to have these moments of high drama, you don't want to cheapen, the merchandise, if you will. So it all makes sense. Now, Joe, shot out of a cannon, I always will hit you with something we don't discuss. So my question is, what is and you can only pick one, what's your favorite summer and favorite winter Olympic event?
I'm going to say I always like the 100-meter dash in the summer. There's no substitute for seeing who the fastest human is. And then for the winter games, I will say for hours watched in the Winter Olympics, I watch a fair amount of curling, Mike. I won't say it's my favorite, but I can't get enough curling every 4 years. So I do like that.
Well, I know what you're getting this holiday season as one surprise gift.
Yeah. So I would have to say curling in the Winter Games, 100-meter dash summer. How about yourself?
I have a curveball here. I really like to watch. Again, just like you, here's my caveat. I don't know if I like it, but I watch the race walking. It is walking very fast.
They're moving with that. They're swishing.
I mean, that is the sport that I wish Will Ferrell would do a movie about. I think maybe Will Ferrell, if you're out there, call me or direct message me.
Yeah, he'll throw his back out though. That's the only problem with that speed. You got to have one foot on the ground at all times. I do know the rules of Olympic speed walking.
That's why you are always leading the way here on IP Goes Pop. You know things like that. So with the race walking, it is very hard. I dare anyone to try to walk as fast as they can without going into a jog. It's very difficult.
Look at how fast the people walk these miles too. It's unbelievable.
I guess in the Winter Games, I have to go with one of the sports on the ice. I think that there's so much, everyone is just basically waiting for someone to fall and to wipe out. And for some reason, the announcers, the broadcasters always put so much drama into it. You can't help but get into it. And then there's all the terminology that you learn and that you know for about 4 weeks, and then you forget until the 4 years goes by. So I guess, Joe, did we miss anything in the IP world of the Olympics here?
I think something that people may be interested in is people start registering each of these names very early in the process of bidding on the Olympics. So there is a big framework set up by each of these exploratory committees each of the countries may have for the bid cities. I know in recent times, a lot of countries are saying we don't want the Olympics because after the Olympics, a year or two later, you always see these pictures on the internet of the Olympic facilities in some of these countries, and they're not being used at all.
In fact, they look like post-apocalyptic science fiction town.
Yeah. It's like, what happened here? It's like, oh, we had the Olympics 2 years ago.
Right.
So this is what we have now. So it's just some of that and the marketing that goes into it, some of the different characters that you'll see. A lot of the Olympics will have a mascot, something along those lines. That is something that's from the early stages protected by IP.
And by the way, this reminds me of 2 Simpsons episodes. One, the monorail, when they had the towns that were totally abandoned because of the monorail. And number 2, Springy, the Olympic mascot. Oh, and by the way, Joe, just so you know, on the registering ahead of time, on the brand usage guidelines of the USOPC website at teamusa.org, they already have Paris 2024, Los Angeles 2028, LA 2028, LA 28 as part of their list of marks already on there.
You can see where things are sort of headed with some of the different advanced protection some organizations would have. And if they're not really listed in that, it would be really atypical that something would go to something where there isn't a mark already registered for it. I'm looking forward to watching with everyone in a couple weeks. Hope USA does well in these Olympics, and it'll be definitely different. It'll be weird with no fans. It's weird we're doing it, the 2020 games in 2021, but I'm going to watch.
So from Joe and myself and all of us at Volpe Koenig, here's hoping you are standing on a podium someday, getting a gold medal perhaps, possibly silver, bronze we can talk about, but at any rate, watching the flag of your home country in a beautiful ceremony and pageantry. And for all of us at IP Goes Pop, we will see you next time. Thanks.
The IP Goes Pop podcast series is created and produced by Volpe Koenig, an intellectual property law firm based in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Visit us at vklaw.com.